Hi, I built my own EDHREC because we deserve better than the one that we have. This is EDHREC's deck recommender page. If you've never seen it before, I don't blame you. They don't really advertise it all that well, but it's simple enough. You paste your deck list, it'll think for a bit, and then it'll show you recommendations for your specific deck. Sounds handy, right? Personalized recommendations for your deck from the site that's seen millions of them. Well, there's a subtle problem with this system that throws the accuracy of all of its results into question. To demonstrate, let me introduce you to Kadena, a slinking sorcerer. Kadena is a commander that reduces the cost of the first face-down spell you cast each turn by 3, and she draws you a card whenever a face-down creature enters the battlefield under your control. Kadena's decks are very distinct compared to the average Sultai deck because she heavily incentivizes you to play a specific category of cards, namely morph spells. Since I'm a weirdo, my Kadena deck doesn't care about morph at all. Instead, my deck manifests big permanents, which puts them onto the battlefield face down directly, and then blinks them to cheat their mana costs. Well, the truth is actually a bit more complicated, but that it doesn't matter. So, what's the problem? Here's EDHREC's recommendations for the precon. And here are EDHREC's recommendations for my weird Kadena list.
They're the same picture.
Despite how objectively different these two decks are, the cards that EDHREC spits out for my Kadena deck and the precon are so similar that you didn't even realize that I switched the two result sets. These are the recommendations for the precon, and these are the ones for my deck.
Or is it? Or is it? This game is never not going to be fun.
Now, let's check out my Recommander, which you can actually use right now at recommander.cards. That's Recommander with an A, and before any of you smartasses try to fish people watching this video, I also bought Recommander.card, so you don't do that. It cost me $70 goddamn dollars. Anyway, on the left are my recommendations for the precon Kadena, and on the right are my recommendations for my Kadena. Notice how the precon Kadena has substantially more synergy pieces related to face-down cards, such as Eudora, Grave Gardener, Ixidor, Reality Sculptor, and Zimini, Mystery Unraveled. While my Kadena deck gets recommended big permanents that would be great to cheat out, like Omniscience, Zendikar Resurgent, and Hullbreaker Horror. It's truly night and day, but how can my recommendations be so much better when they have so many more decks? Come along and I'll show you. Now, if I wanted to build an EDHREC, I had to start by getting the same type of data that EDHREC has. Deck lists, and tons of them. Now for that, I have to go to the source. Deck building websites like Moxfield and Architect. Of course, I'm lazy and impatient, and I didn't want to have to A, write code to constantly scrape these websites, and B, wait to download those decks once I did. So I took the obvious first step and simply asked them for their deck list data. They said no. I even offered to pay for it, but they still said no. Then I asked EDHREC themselves if I could use their collected corpus of deck lists, telling them full well I was developing this site with the information. This worked, actually. I've got a 20 gig file of EDHREC lists on my desktop right now. The problem is that, like an autopsy report in a Phoenix Wright case, it would become outdated almost immediately after I got it. Outdated deck lists are bad because if you surface recommendations based on old data, you will only ever recommend old cards, missing new releases. So begrudgingly, I got to work. You know that debug menu that pops up in a browser when you hit F12, and if your grandma accidentally activates it, she calls you to ask how to get rid of it? Yeah, those actually also tell you exactly how these websites work, if you know what to look for. So, with permission from both websites and taking care not to overload their services, I reverse engineered the public APIs of both Moxfield and Architect. Then, I set up a script that would repeatedly search these websites for their most recently updated commander lists, and ingested them in a standardized form to my own personal database. A few months later, and I'm sitting on over 600,000 unique decks. That's more than enough to get started on the fun part, which is... It turns out recommending new products to customers is a goal that a lot of businesses have and want to solve. Netflix recommends you movies to watch, Amazon recommends you products to buy, and YouTube, the very site you're on right now, recommends that you like and subscribe to me. It's absolutely disgusting that our likes and dislikes are shaped by algorithms, but that doesn't mean I'm above using that sort of tech myself. The strategy I'm using is a variation of a technique called collaborative filtering. It works like this. Imagine every deck is on a big chart, where the rows are the deck IDs and the columns are the cards. If your deck list contains Arcane Signet, then your deck list row has a check mark in the Arcane Signet column. and if it doesn't because you're a hipster, then it's left unchecked. Extrapolate out for every card, and that means that every card in Magic is either checked or unchecked for every deck list row. I could solve the recommendation problem this way. When you put your deck list into my website, how do I find the previously seen decks that are most similar to yours? I mean, if I could do that, then I could just source recommendations for your deck from those previously seen examples. That's why it's called collaborative filtering. You're filtering which cards are important by forming collaborations with other decks.
That's nuts!
The problem with that is, if you multiply the size of every deck list I have times every card in Magic, then that matrix is enormous. You have to reduce the search space, or else it'll take forever for the computer to find the right recommendations. One easy optimization is realizing that it's not one big chart of decks to every Magic card, but actually 32 smaller charts. I could group each deck by color identity, which cuts down not only on the number of deck lists in each chart, but also the number of legal cards I have to keep track of. There's no sense recommending islands to a mono-red deck. I'm also creating what's called a singular value decomposition of the table, which is a math thing that I can use to calculate a lower rank approximation of my data. Think of it like increasing the JPEG-ness of the card checklist. I'm not exactly storing the entire mapping of rows and columns, but compressing it just enough to make it smaller, faster, and most importantly, actually usable in the Recommander without having to pay Jesus Christ. Best of all, SVD and its variants are such a common technique that there's a lot of off-the-shelf recommendation systems I can use. For this project, I used a program called vowpal wabbit, a machine learning system originally developed at Yahoo of all places. I chose this because it has an online learning algorithm. It uses a variant of these techniques that doesn't make me recalculate the entire model every time new data comes in, which is useful because I'm still continuously downloading new decks and updating predictions every day. Now, training this model seems simple. For a deck list with 100 cards, I would simply make 100 copies of it. Each copy has one card held out from it. I would feed the model 100 examples, each being a deck list with 99 cards and the held out candidate card, and say, yep, this card belongs in this deck. Doing that over and over for every deck, it should learn to form associations between cards that are often seen together, and I should be able to easily query for the best cards when a new deck shows up. There are two glaring problems with this approach, however. Problem number one, if you only tell the model what cards are included in each deck, it will rapidly learn that everything is associated with everything else and start saying that every card belongs in every deck. Oops. Turns out, you not only need to say what cards are in each deck, but you also have to say which cards are explicitly not in each deck, and that's a way harder problem to solve. That problem is called mining negatives, and it's a crucial part of training a model like this. I went for a quick and dirty solution here. For each deck, I simply took a few examples of the most popular cards in the deck's color identity and said, well, this card isn't in the deck, so it doesn't belong. That's just an approximation. What about the second problem? Well, let me introduce you to the most disgusting card in all of Magic. Yeah, every card in Commander synergizes with Sol Ring. Staple cards are a big problem for collaborative filtering, because no matter what off-the-wall strategy your deck uses, they're still worth including. That means a lot of people put them in their decks, which means the Recommender system learns that Sol Ring has a positive association with every other card in the game. As the end user, what that means is if your deck doesn't contain Sol Ring, the Recommender sure will fucking tell you about it, and it's not just Sol Ring either. Common lands like fetches and shocks, removal spells like Swords to Plowshares, and draw engines like Rhystic Study are also heavily correlated with most Magic cards. If I don't find a way to deal with them, then my recommendations will always look like EDHREC's top cards page, and that's something I wanted to avoid, considering that's the entire stated purpose of this project. I tried doing some statistics to punish popularity and elevate the cards that are more relevant to each commander, but relying too heavily on commander data causes the Recommender to ignore the context of the specific deck itself, and as anyone who listens to the podcast I'm on knows, context is important. I'm actually pretty sure that this is EDHREC's problem. Pushing high-lift cards is actually a great idea to source Recs when you're just starting out with a deck and searching for ideas related to a commander, but once your game plan is fully formed, they need to back off and consider your specific list as important instead of falling back to commander-wide stats. As for handling Sol Ring, the real solution was the easiest one the entire time. Cards that are more popular are simply scaled down during training so they do not contribute to the score nearly as much. Their lower score is offset by the fact that they're seen much more frequently in training, so while I'll still recommend staples, they're not completely dominating the page anymore. So, what have I learned when it comes to recommending cards for Commander decks? Well, getting information from a huge corpus of decks will help you, but you have to be careful to stay up to date with your deck data. You have to make sure you're mining enough negatives so the recommendation system doesn't say everything is an include. You have to scale staples by their popularity so they don't dominate the conversation. And finally, and most importantly, you can't rely solely on per commander data to figure out what's good for each individual deck. There are more improvements that can be made from here too. With access to deck and card level tags as well as combo data, it could be possible to surface deep fits, or recommendations for cards that don't have a lot of representation in the data. With access to edit history, you can draw stronger negatives, which would allow you to recommend popular cards more confidently instead of them being globally suppressed. And with access to insert order, you could better recommend which card could go into your deck next, which would help build up decks from smaller starting points instead of more or less requiring a completed deck list to be useful. That's all I've got to teach you today. If you've liked this, please subscribe, leave a like, and a comment, and don't forget to check out the fruits of my labor at Recommander.cards. See you around next time.